Let me start with the moment that snapped something inside me. Because some pain doesn't scream. It smiles. It clinks champagne glasses. And it laughs while you're standing right there. I'm Hannah, 32 years old, and 3 weeks ago, at my father's retirement party, he did something so cold, so calculated, that I knew right then and there this family was done with me, and I was done with them. Picture this. A high-end country club in Connecticut, crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, about 200 people dressed like they stepped out of a Wall Street magazine, CEOs, bankers, lawyers, old money pretending it still matters, new money trying to prove it does. My father, Richard Evans, stood on stage with a microphone in his hand. Big smile, perfect posture, that same polished executive voice he'd been using my whole life. He started introducing his family one by one. His wife. Applause. My stepbrother. Standing ovation. The future CEO. The golden child. Then he got to me. And this, he said, pausing just long enough for the room to quiet down, is my daughter, Hannah. He smiled. That smile I knew too well. The kind that looks warm to strangers but cuts like glass if you're the target. No degree, no real career, he chuckled, just freeloading her way through life. For half a second, the room hesitated. Then 200 people laughed, not nervous laughs, not awkward ones. Real laughter. I didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't look away. I picked up my champagne glass, stood up slowly, and said, loud enough for every mic in the room to catch it, cheers. This is the last time any of you will ever see me. The room went dead silent. I didn't wait for a reaction. I didn't explain myself. I turned around and walked out. That moment. That was 12 years of silence finally screaming back. But to understand why that moment mattered, you need to know how I became invisible in the first place. I grew up in a house that looked perfect from the outside. Big colonial home, luxury cars in the driveway. We were the Evans family, respectable, successful, untouchable. My mom died when I was 8. Cancer, fast and brutal. I barely remember her face, but I remember her hands, always warm, always holding mine. 2 years later, my father remarried. Her name was Carol. She came with a son, Jason, 3 years older than me. And almost overnight, they became the family. I became background noise. No yelling. No abuse you could point at, just invisibility. Jason got praise. I got silence. Jason got the new car. I got whatever he didn't want anymore. Jason was the future of the company. I was just there. My father never hit me, never screamed. He did something worse. He looked through me. Like I was a window he kept checking past. There was only one person who truly saw me. My grandmother, Margaret Evans. Every Sunday, she'd call. How's school, sweetheart? What do you want to do with your life? Don't let them shrink you. She used to tell me, you remind me of myself. Underestimated, but dangerous. I didn't understand what she meant back then. I would later. Fast forward. I was 20 years old, sophomore year of college. Business major, straight A's. I had dreams, big ones. Then my father called me home. Family meeting. Those 2 words always meant bad news. I walked into his office. Dark wood. Awards everywhere. Carol standing next to him like a loyal soldier. He didn't even look up. We need to make sacrifices, he said. Jason had been accepted into an elite MBA program. Expensive. Prestigious. Life-changing. We can't afford both tuitions. My father said flatly. So you'll be taking a break from school. A break. That's what they called it when they ripped my future out of my hands. Carol smiled sweetly. You don't really need a degree, Hannah. You'll find a husband. That's what matters. I sat there frozen. You promised Mom, I said quietly. You said you'd support my education. My father's jaw tightened. Things change. They never changed back. I left with $2,000, a suitcase, and a promise to myself. No one would ever decide my worth again. That promise is what led me to Boston. To ramen dinners. To sleeping above a laundromat. It's also what led me, years later, right back into that ballroom. With power none of them saw coming. And that's where this story really begins. Rock bottom doesn't look dramatic in real life. It doesn't come with violins or slow motion tears. It looks like a 400 square foot studio apartment over a laundromat. where the walls are so thin you can hear strangers argue at 2 a.m. and the radiator bangs like it's mad at you for existing. That was my new reality. Boston. No family, no safety net, no one to fall back on. Just me, a mattress on the floor, and a future I had to build with my bare hands. I worked mornings at a cafe downtown. Free day, old bagels were dinner more times than I want to admit. I learned how to stretch a dollar like it owed me money. I walked everywhere. I lied and said I liked the city life, when really I just couldn't afford the subway every day. But here's the thing nobody tells you about being stripped of everything. When there's nothing left to lose, fear stops working. I wasn't scared anymore. I was focused. 3 months in, I landed a job as an administrative assistant at a small logistics company. Entry level, minimum pay, zero glamour, the kind of job my father would have laughed at. But I treated it like a battlefield. I showed up early, stayed late, asked questions nobody else bothered to ask. I didn't just file paperwork, I studied it. I didn't just answer emails, I learned why they were sent. I learned routes, warehouses, supply chains. At night, while everyone else was watching Netflix, I was glued to my laptop taking free online courses. Operations, supply chain management, business analytics. MIT OpenCourseWare became my Ivy League. And slowly, quietly, something started to happen. People noticed. My boss, Walter? A gruff guy who looked like he'd been yelling at spreadsheets since the 90s. Called me into his office one afternoon. "You're not supposed to be this good," he said. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. "I'm serious," he continued. "You see things others miss." That was the first time an authority figure had ever said something like that to me. And it hit harder than any insult my father had ever thrown. Because for the first time, someone saw me. I stayed there 4 years. 4 years of grinding while my family thought I'd disappeared. 4 years of building skills instead of excuses. I didn't call home. Didn't ask for money. When my father's assistant mailed me a birthday card with $50 inside, I tore it up and threw it in the trash. I wasn't accepting crumbs from people who starved me emotionally. By year 4, I had something dangerous: confidence backed by competence. I quit my job and started my own consulting firm. Just me, a laptop, a rented desk in a co-working space. I named it North Meridian Consulting. No personal branding, no LinkedIn flexing, no press releases. I kept my name off everything. Not because I was ashamed, but because I knew my family. If they ever found out I was succeeding, they'd either try to take credit or tear it down. So I built in silence. The clients came, then more, then bigger ones. I hired my first employee, then my second. Revenue grew, so did my confidence. But the wildest part, one of my biggest clients was Evans Logistics, my father's company. They signed a multi-year contract through legal reps. Never met me, never knew. My father praised our work at industry events, called our firm essential, transformative. Every compliment was another brick in a wall he didn't know he was standing behind. 2 years ago, my grandmother died. I flew back for the funeral, sat in the back, watched my father give a speech about family values. I didn't stay long. 3 days later, I got a phone call. A lawyer. "Hannah," she said, "your grandmother set up a trust in your name 8 years ago." 8 years. She never told anyone. The amount? Enough to change my life. Enough to protect me. Enough to prove she had always known exactly what was happening. She left a letter too. It said, "When they finally see your worth, it will already be too late." I cried harder than I had in years, not from sadness. From being believed in, even after death. I expanded the business, hired more people, moved into a real office. And then, 3 weeks ago, that gold-embossed invitation arrived. My father's retirement party, and I knew, deep down, something ugly was coming. I just didn't know it would give me the perfect stage. I almost didn't go. That invitation sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days like it was radioactive. Gold lettering. Heavy paper. "Richard Evans requests the pleasure of your company." I laughed out loud. The audacity. After 12 years of silence, now I was suddenly worth inviting. But then I thought about my grandmother. About everything she'd protected me from. About everything they still didn't know. And that's when I realized something important. I wasn't going for them. I was going for closure. The Fairfield Country Club looked exactly the same as it did when I was a kid. Same crystal chandeliers. Same fake smiles. Same people pretending their money made them interesting. I stepped out of my car wearing a simple black dress. Clean lines. Tailored. Nothing flashy. Not because I needed to prove anything, but because I knew exactly who I was. Inside, the air smelled like perfume, money, and old secrets. Carol spotted me almost immediately. Her eyes did that familiar scan: shoes, bag, watch. Calculating my worth in under 2 seconds. "Hannah," she said, smile glued on. "You came." "Of course," I replied. She leaned in, voice low. "Your father wasn't sure you'd have something appropriate to wear." I smiled. How thoughtful. They seated me at table 14. Back corner, near the service door. Not family, not even close. Classic. A waiter offered champagne. I took it. Across the room, my father caught my eye. A single nod. Dismissive. The message was clear: you're still nobody here. From that corner, I listened. That's one thing invisibility teaches you: how to hear everything. My father was holding court near the bar. Laughing. Bragging. "And honestly," he said, "our consultants at North Meridian saved our operation. Absolute geniuses." Another executive leaned in. "I've been trying to meet whoever runs that firm. They're ghosts." My father shrugged. "Never met them. Don't care. As long as they keep delivering." I took a sip of champagne to hide my smile. My phone buzzed. A text from my CFO: contract renewal from Evans Logistics. 5 years. "Waiting on your call." I typed back: "We'll talk after tonight." That's when the side comments started. The whispers. "Oh, that's Richard's daughter. I heard she never finished college. Such a shame." An aunt I barely recognized cornered me near the bar. "Hannah, still in Boston doing whatever it is you do?" "Consulting?" I said. That pity smile. "Are you seeing anyone? You know, at your age?" Another relative chimed in. "Richard said you had a tough time after leaving school. Emotionally. Mental health." That's the story he'd been telling. I realized then, he hadn't just ignored me all these years. He'd rewritten me. I stepped outside onto the terrace, needing air. That's when Jason found me, still handsome. Still smug. "Well, look who showed up," he said. "The family mystery." I didn't turn around. "Relax." He laughed. "Dad just wanted to make sure you weren't planning a scene." I faced him then. "You don't know me well enough to predict my behavior." He smirked. "I know you. You disappear when things get hard. You always have." That's when I knew. They still saw the same broken version of me. The one they created. Inside, the lights dimmed. Music faded. My father stepped onto the stage. Applause thundered. He soaked it in like oxygen. He thanked everyone, praised Carol, announced Jason as the new CEO, standing ovation. Then, his eyes landed on me, and that same cruel smile returned. "And of course," he said, "my daughter Hannah? Spotlight. No degree. No real career. Just floating through life." Laughter exploded, and in that moment, I felt nothing. No anger, no shame. Just clarity, because everything I'd built in silence was about to roar. I stood up. Slowly. And the room went quiet. And that's where I'll stop this section, because what happens next, what I say into that silence, changes everything. When I stood up, the room didn't just go quiet. It froze. 200 people holding their breath, waiting for the breakdown they'd been primed to expect. The unstable daughter. The emotional one. The embarrassment. I felt the spotlight heat on my skin. My father's smile faltered. Just a little. He hadn't planned for this. I lifted my champagne glass slowly, deliberately, every movement controlled. "Congratulations on your retirement, Dad," I said. My voice didn't shake. Not even a little. 40 years in business. That's impressive. Polite applause rippled through the room, confused and cautious. I continued. "You taught me a lot. About hard work. About sacrifice. About exactly how loyalty works in this family." The air turned heavy. People shifted in their seats. I raised my glass higher. "So here's to you." I paused. "This is the last time any of you will ever see me." Silence slammed down like a vault door. I set the glass down untouched, picked up my bag and walked away. Not rushed, not emotional, just done. My heels echoed across the hardwood floor. No one clapped. No one spoke. I didn't look back, Because I already knew what I'd see. Shock, confusion, embarrassment. And none of it mattered anymore. Outside, the night air hit my lungs like freedom. I was halfway to my car when I heard heels clicking behind me. "Hannah, stop." Carol's voice, sharp. Panicked. She grabbed my arm. "What do you think you're doing? You humiliated your father." I looked down at her hand until she let go. "I think you've got that backward." My father stormed out behind her, face tight with rage. "Get back inside," he hissed. "Apologize, now?" "No." That word felt better than anything I'd ever said in my life. "You don't get to speak to me like this," he snapped. "I'm your father." "No," I replied calmly. "You're a man who just told 200 people his daughter was worthless." He stepped closer. "If you walk away now, you're done. No family, no support." I almost laughed. "You cut me off 12 years ago," I said. "You just never had the guts to say it out loud." I opened my car door. "This ends tonight." I drove for 20 minutes before pulling over. Hands shaking. Heart pounding. Not from fear. From release. 12 years of swallowing. My voice finally came up for air. The next morning, my phone exploded. Concerned messages. "Your dad says you're struggling. We're worried about your mental health." The story was already being rewritten. Poor Hannah. Unstable. Jailous. I ignored every single one. Then came the interesting call. A partner from Evans Logistics. He sounded nervous. "There are questions about your relationship with North Meridian." They were circling. Getting close. That's when I knew silence wasn't protection anymore. It was time for truth. And truth was going to cost them everything. By Tuesday morning, the tone changed. No more pity texts. No more, "We're worried about you," nonsense. Now it was fear, dressed up as professionalism. My phone rang with a number I recognized immediately. Evans Logistics. Executive line. I answered. "Hannah," the man said carefully. "This is Paul Henderson. I'm a senior partner at the firm." Of course he was. They never send the assistants when they're scared. "I'm listening," I said. "There's been some confusion," he continued, "regarding North Meridian Consulting. A few people believe you may have some connection to them." Some connection. I almost smiled. "What kind of connection?" I asked. A pause. "Well," he said slowly, "someone mentioned seeing you near their Boston office. I'm sure it's nothing. Phishing, careful phishing. I consult for a lot of companies." I replied evenly. "I don't see how that concerns my father." Another pause. "I'll pass that along," he said. "Richard would like to speak with you." "No," I said and hung up. That afternoon, the calls multiplied. My father. Jason. Carol. Missed call. Missed call. By evening, my voicemail was full. I didn't listen. Because I already knew what they were saying. They weren't sorry, they were cornered. The next morning, I sat across from my CFO, Daniel, in our glass-walled conference room. Calm. Bright. "Mine. They're spooked," he said, scrolling through his tablet. "They've been calling our legal team nonstop." "Good," I replied. "The contract renewal?" I asked. Daniel looked up. "They want 5 more years. Increased rates. Better terms. They're desperate." I stared at the numbers on the screen. 40% of their operational efficiency. Gone. One decision away. "What happens if we walk?" I asked. Daniel didn't sugarcoat it. "They collapse. Not overnight, but fast enough to hurt." I nodded slowly. "Draft the termination notice." Daniel blinked. "You're sure?" "Yes," I said. 30 days. Clean, professional." He hesitated. "And your father?" "That's separate." That night, I wrote him a letter. Not angry. Not emotional. Honest. I told him the truth he'd avoided his whole life, that the company he bragged about was being held together by the daughter he mocked. That the firm he called essential belonged to me. That I wasn't ending the contract for revenge, but for peace. I signed it with my full name, including my grandmother's. Monday morning, 9:02 a.m. Courier delivered, signed for by his executive assistant. I watched my phone. 9017, missed call. 9019, missed call. 924, text call me now. I didn't. By noon, there were 12 missed calls. By 2 p.m., my assistant knocked on my door. "Hannah, your family is in the lobby. They drove 5 hours. Uninvited." Panicked. I stood up, smoothed my blazer, and said, Send them to conference room B. Glass walls. Witnesses. I wasn't hiding anymore, because when truth finally walks into the room, power doesn't know where to sit. Conference room B was all glass and steel. My office. My rules. When I walked in, they were already there. My father, Carol, and Jason, standing awkwardly like trespassers who hadn't realized the house was occupied. For the first time in my life, my father turned first. "Hannah," he said, voice tight. "What is this?" I sat at the head of the table, calm, centered. "I assume you received my letter." Jason didn't wait. "You can't do this?" he snapped. "You don't even have a degree." I looked at him, really looked, and realized something surprising. He was scared. "Sit down," I said quietly. He hesitated, then did. My father leaned forward, hands clasped. "This is some misunderstanding," he said. "You don't own a firm like North Meridian." I slid a folder across the table. Incorporation papers, tax filings, client contracts, my name, sole owner, silence. Carol's face drained of color. "You lied," she whispered. "No," I replied. "I just didn't announce myself to people who never listened." Jason stood again. "You planned this? You waited for the perfect moment to destroy us." I shook my head. "I planned nothing. I built something. Your company chose to depend on it." My father exhaled sharply. "All right," he said. "I'm sorry about the party." I held his gaze. "You're sorry because you need something." He didn't deny it. "We can fix this," he said. "Name your price." That hurt more than his insult ever did. "I don't want anything from you," I said. "I just want the truth on the table." I told them about my grandmother's trust. About the money, about how she protected me from them. Carol gasped. She knew. She knew everything. Jason slammed his hand on the table. "If you pull that contract, people lose jobs." I met his eyes. "You built a company that couldn't survive without me. That's not my fault." My father's voice dropped. "You walk away from this family, you get nothing." I smiled softly. "You already gave me nothing." I stood. "This meeting is over." At the door, I paused. "If you contact me again," I said calmly, "I release everything. Emails. Documents. The full story." They didn't follow me. They couldn't. Because for the first time, they were powerless. I thought walking them out of my office would be the end of it. I was wrong. That meeting wasn't a conclusion. It was a trigger. Because once power cracks, everything leaks. I didn't hear the fallout from my family directly. I heard it from the outside. The way you always do when things are really falling apart. A former client texted me. "Hey, wild question, but is it true you used to be related to Richard Evans?" A week later, an industry contact called. "Off the record," he said, "people are saying Evans Logistics lost their biggest consulting partner." "That true?" I said nothing. I didn't need to. The silence did the damage for me. Evans Logistics announced strategic restructuring. That's corporate language for panic. 20% of their workforce gone. Right before the holidays. Jason had been CEO for less than 3 months. The board started circling, quietly at first, then openly. My father, the man who'd planned a flawless, triumphant retirement, stepped back in, temporarily, to help stabilize things. Everyone knew what that meant. The future he'd built for his son was collapsing under the weight of his own decisions. Then the whispers got louder. At business lunches. At charity events. At closed-door meetings. "Did you hear he mocked his daughter in public?" Turns out she was running the firm, keeping them afloat. Cold man. Always was. Reputation is fragile. And in Connecticut business circles, it's everything. My father stopped getting invited to certain dinners. People didn't return his calls as fast, he noticed. He just didn't say it out loud. I didn't celebrate. That surprised me. I expected relief, maybe satisfaction. Instead, I felt tired. Like someone who finally put down a weight they'd been carrying so long they forgot it wasn't normal. A month later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "I shouldn't be calling," a man said. "But you deserve to know." It was my uncle. My father's younger brother. The one everyone called. The disappointment. Because he'd chosen art over business. "There's something about your college tuition," he said quietly. Something you were never told. I sat down. He told me the truth. My mother had set aside a fund for my education before she died. Enough to cover everything. My father drained it, used it for Jason, then told me there was no money. I closed my eyes. Everything snapped into focus. My grandmother's trust, her silence, her anger. She hadn't just helped me. She'd tried to correct a theft. That night, I visited her grave. I told her everything. Out loud. I get it now, I said. You weren't just protecting me. The wind moved through the trees like an answer. 6 months later, my life looked nothing like it used to. North Meridian was stronger than ever. New clients, more stability, a bigger office overlooking the harbor. I started therapy. Not because I was broken, but because I was finally ready to heal. My therapist asked me one question that stuck. Do you hate them? I shook my head. No, I said honestly. I just don't need them. And that's the part nobody warns you about. Walking away from family doesn't feel like victory. It feels like grief and freedom at the same time. You mourn the parents you should have had, while protecting the person you became without them. Which brings me to the last thing I want to tell you. The part that matters most. People love clean endings. Villains punished. Heroes celebrated. Justice served with a bow on top. Real life doesn't work like that. What happened to my family didn't feel like revenge. It felt like gravity. They stepped off the edge. I just stopped holding the rope. A year after my father's retirement party, Evan's Logistics was a shadow of what it used to be. Still operating, still breathing, but wounded. Jason stepped down quietly. No announcements, no speeches, just gone. My father stayed on as advisor. A title that meant everything and nothing at the same time. People stopped asking about them. That's the real punishment in their world: irrelevance. As for me, I didn't become famous. Didn't do interviews. Didn't tell my story publicly. I didn't need applause. I needed peace. North Meridian grew, not explosively, but solidly, sustainably. The way real things grow when they're built right. I hired people who'd been overlooked. People who reminded me of myself. Quiet. Capable. Hungry. I made it a rule no one gets diminished in my building. Ever. Therapy taught me something powerful. The voice in your head that tells you you're not enough. That voice usually doesn't start with you. It's inherited, passed down, disguised as discipline, marketed as tough love. I had spent years trying to prove I was worthy to people who benefited from me feeling small. Once I stopped doing that, everything changed. I still visit my grandmother's grave. I tell her about new clients, new hires, small victories. I thank her, not just for the money, for seeing me, for believing me before I believed myself. If there's one thing I want you to take from this story, it's this. You are not broken just because the people who raised you couldn't see your value. You are not behind. You are not weak. You are not too much or not enough. Sometimes, you're just growing in the wrong environment. Walking away from family doesn't make you heartless. Staying somewhere that crushes you doesn't make you loyal. Boundaries aren't revenge. They're self-respect. My father thought he was humiliating me that night. What he actually did was set me free. And freedom, it's quiet, it's boring, it doesn't clap, but it lets you breathe. If you're watching this and you've ever been the family disappointment, the invisible one, the scapegoat, the one who didn't live up to expectations, I see you. And I promise you something. Your life doesn't begin when they approve of you. It begins when you stop asking. Thanks for listening. And if this story meant something to you, even a little, stay. There are more stories like this. Until next time.